Hey guys, and welcome to this video. We're just going to get straight into it. The intention of this video is to show you my process for creating a design concept in CAD from scratch. So completely fresh model, nothing, no geometry or predetermined parts pulled into this. This is just everything from scratch and showing you my process. And as well, you can see in the bottom corner of the screen, the notes that I was referring to. So some background on this project. It's with an existing client of mine that I'd spent some time with on some projects with for a number of years, just intermittently, on and off. And did this one project with them in the last 12 months. And it's a kid's tricycle. So the brief at this stage was to develop a CAD concept for the tricycle, how it would look, roughly how parts would interact, how they would move. We didn't need to work out all the details, all the nuts and bolts and ribs and plastic thicknesses. It's not about that at this stage. We did proceed to that stage, which is next. That video would be too long to show in a time lapse, so I might just show you a couple of renders and images at the end of this. But here, look, what I'm doing is I'm building up a master sketch and a master file from scratch. So what you can see in my feature tree is I've kept a sketch there, which I'm calling my master sketch, and I constantly come back to that sketch to add more information. So I'm adding more dimensions, more details, and then slowly building out some of the features. So you can see quite early here, I've only got a couple of features, and they're very simple features. We're using boss extrudes, cuts, some thin features, okay? But yeah, everything is just basic geometry, basic block modeling at this point. Often a block model, in design, a block model is something that is just very simple geometry to give someone the sort of idea of size and shape of what it is that they're working on. I've used those before in some of my past jobs, past roles. But yeah, so with what we can see here, I'm starting to put in some wheels and some hubs. Okay, and again, these are not pretty or well refined. We're just getting some of the base geometry in there. And as I'm working through the notes that I've been given, here I'm ticking things off and adding markers to say where things need to change. So the way that I work with this client is they would have a very good idea in their head about what they want to see, how they want something to work. And this client was talented enough to visualize that, be able to visualize that with sketches, okay? And usually with some dimensions, they'd make some educated guesses. They would rely on me to put actual dimensions and actual scale to their ideas and convert what they're thinking from their head 2D on paper into 3 dimensions and something that we could build. Okay, so now you can see the feature tree here. We're starting to develop a bit more detail. This is obviously a symmetrical object, so there is a mirror feature down there in the bottom. I think you'll see later in the project that we kind of split some elements of it, and a lot of what I build, I'm just going to build on one half of the product. So like right now, these front forks, I've done it on both sides, and that's sort of helping me visualize. But when I get to the detailing stage of that part, I'll come back to it and I'll split it in half. I'll just focus on detailing one side of it. Okay, just halves the amount of work you need to do for something that is symmetrical. It's a great little tool to have sort of, in your arsenal for when you're developing the product. Your mindset, you only need to think about, what does it look like on one half of the product? No, you can just mirror straight to the other side. So here I'm starting to block out some more elements of the forks. And you can also see my feature tree, it's shrunk in length because I'm starting to place elements into folders. So as I start building out the features, okay, using a lot of extrudes, cuts, some revolves, some thin features, I'm just building as many of those as I go. As I go through the requirements of the project from my notes, I'm just building out to get that geometry in there. Right, I will build out to a point. That point might be the end of a working session for a couple of hours, or the end of the brief from a client for that phase of the work. So I might go through and get all of that geometry done, okay, and then I can go back to my model, and that's when I can clean up my model. And you can see what we've got now is a very clean feature tree where I've got a master sketch and a second sketch at the top of the tree, but then everything below is into folders, and I've repositioned and reordered some of those features so that they make sense. So, and what I mean by that is everything that's connected to or related to the front stem of the tricycle is in that top section, top folder. And then everything related to the central tubes is in that folder that comes next. And so if I later, and you'll see throughout this time lapse here, if I get a new request from the client and they're wanting some modifications or some additional detail into one of those early parts, like the central tubes, well, I can roll back in the feature tree like I've got right now, and I can add that detail and then roll the tree back down, okay? And if I've designed it in such a way that you can see using fully defined sketches everywhere here, design it in a way that those new features are independent of everything else, then I'll have very minimal errors to deal with. You will see from time to time I will have a lot of dangling dimensions, okay? You can see them here. As I'm working down, I do have a couple of errors, so I'm changing the geometry of these front forks at the moment, for instance. So as I'm changing the geometry and the way that they are built, okay, that's going to cause errors. So the way I like to work through those is top down. So I'll roll all the way back up to the top. I'll change my sketches to reflect my updated design intent or the updated design intent of the client. I'll make those changes, and then I can roll down, and any errors that pop up, I'm knocking them off one by one, okay, from the top to the bottom. And hopefully, you know, you might sometimes resolve your errors, resolve your design of that feature, and then any features below that are actually now obsolete. So even though there are errors there, you can just select them all and delete them. Okay. Now we're into a point where we're starting to get many bodies in our model. So I think I can see in the feature tree there's up to about maybe 17 or 18 bodies. And so what I like to do is add colors to those bodies. These colors don't reflect anything particular at this stage. All I'm doing is just making it clear visually as I'm working, and as if I share any notes back to my clients, what those parts are, so what parts are connected and what parts are separate and can move. I try and use pastel colors, bright colors. I try and avoid the blacks and the grays too much, just because I want something that's going to differentiate. Okay, and you can see as well, now we've probably moved on to the next day or another session, the notes from the client who is, or who I've been supplying maybe an e-drawings file to. Okay, you can see their notes have those same colors in their screenshots where they're adding comments. So this just helps everyone stay aligned on the project. And if we jumped on a call, for instance, we could say, okay, well, look at this yellow part here. We don't need to have predetermined descriptions for all of the parts. Everything's still in flux, right? Everything's still moving very quickly. just by having colors on these bodies makes it very easy to identify what you're working on and what needs to change. So one thing that we'll find towards the end of this video is I'm actually keeping everything in one part file. I don't actually split the part file to child parts until the second phase of the project when we move into prototyping. I knew from the scope of this phase of the project that the amount of detail required would not be extensive, and I'd be able to keep everything in that one file. The benefit of that was that everything is editable in the one file. I'm not having to alt tab between them. I'm not having to make references between different parts. It's a lot quicker and easier to manage, and also for exporting and sending my client like a file they can view. So we would regularly send or share e-drawings, which is a free SolidWorks file that can be viewed on Mac or even iPad. And in 3D, the viewer can rotate the file, they can make measurements, they can do section views, they can hide and isolate parts. It's good just for commenting. So I'd be sending those files, and it means if I've finished a work session, I want to send a file, I'm not having to pack and go or export multiple files from an assembly. I've just got one part file, and that gets sent out. And that makes that a very simple, quick process. So with the project having moved on, we've done some of the base frame, a couple of wheels, we've worked on the size, proportions. You can see in the skeleton sketch here, we're still going back and adding more detail. So now we've added in some of the handlebars. We're starting to add in some of the detail around the back edge with the join for the rear wheels, rear legs, and what would be a rear handlebar as well for like a parent to push along. Eventually this sketch will also have details for a canopy, okay, something to protect and go over the head of the child, as well as like a seat, a rear seat. The seat that they sit on that will fold down, fold up, be adjustable. So those details are starting to get worked through. And again, as I'm adding in these features, I'm organizing them in the feature tree, grouping them there in upper handle, you can see. And anything that comes back to control of the main geometry of the whole product, that gets fed back into the master sketch at the top. And I've learned a little trick to help with that. So let's say you've just been doing some direct modeling and you've added some new features, and some of those features are very key to the entire model. You want to get them back in your master sketch, but you can't because those references are actually down the bottom of your feature tree. What you can do using Sketch, okay, is start a new sketch where you are in the tree, convert whatever edges, geometry, etc. you need. Okay, so you've got them in that sketch, it's a copy. Delete all the relations that are controlling that sketch, but do not move any of those sketch elements. Close the sketch, and that sketch now having no relation to anything else in your model, you can actually drag it up to the top of your tree. Once you've dragged it up to the top, you're dragging it above your master sketch. You can then edit your master sketch and use those lines as reference points to add those details back into your master sketch. So you might convert the entities or just copy over the top of them, and then add your new dimensions in that reference the other elements of your master sketch. Accept that sketch change, go to that previous sketch that's above, delete it, you no longer need it. Voila, you've got some newer features down in your feature tree, now controlling your master sketch. The last step in that, go back to those features and just redo the references that they're built from. So instead of being referenced from something that you've modeled separately to the master sketch, delete those relations, reference the master sketch. I think I'll show that in another video. If I can find it, I'll drop a card or link in the description below. Right, so with the handles, that's actually something that I was very comfortable with given our previous experience working together with this client. We've done a lot of strollers, baby strollers, prams, and a lot of them use aluminium extrusions for the legs, for the handlebars. So it's usually a profile that's extruded and then welded to other parts. And a lot of these products manufactured in China, so very good. They really manage quality of these welds and finishings of these aluminium parts. Okay, so yeah, often in the detail here, we'd be doing a lot of 3D sketches, a lot of sweeps, okay, and sometimes some lofts, and that's what happens with this rear leg here. I actually spend quite a lot of time on it. I was a bit rusty, but the client had a specific request to thicken up these legs. So let's say specific, they said, oh, they just need to look a bit bulkier, a bit stronger. All right, but they like the general profile. So the concept, which we'll get to pretty soon in this time lapse, is I split the leg in half, and then I rotated each half out. So the leg grew as it got either to the top or the bottom, we'll see in a second. But this then meant all the surfacing around it had to change. And to get some good looking surfacing here, again a little bit rusty on this at the time, you can see there's a lot of trial and error just to get that blend, those lofts to work exactly the way we want them to. It's still not quite finished, but we're starting to get a bit more refinement in some of these shapes. You know, we're getting the ability to put some, fillets on edges, some chamfers. We're not going to a really high level of detail, but just enough to show in some basic renders later, what this might look like to the client and the client who they're presenting this to. So now, I think at this stage of the process, sort of halfway through this time lapse, just about, you'll see in the notes there's actually a lot more refinements now. It's not so much adding new geometry, it's modifying what's there. And so a lot of times, one change, so changing the profile of the wheel, will have flow-on effects for maybe 2 or 3 other bodies or other parts. In this case, there's a flow-on effect for the forks, and the way that they were roughly modeled earlier no longer was going to work. So there's some rework there, and you can see that rework takes me higher up in the feature tree. But because I've got all of that history there through the parametric modeling, it means I can make those changes and then roll back down the tree, fix some errors, but everything else remains connected and working. And when I go back to the master sketch, let's say I'm moving, increasing or decreasing the size of those forks, or that sort of thicker section there, which would actually contain some of the locking mechanisms later. This all works because of the way it's been set up. All right, with those sketches, with those refined dimensions, driving dimensions, makes the whole process a lot more easier, more efficient. That's why I was able to get through such amount of content and detail in such a sort of short period of time. I think the complete, so what we're looking at here, if I haven't mentioned already, it's 15 hours of recording, sped up at 20 times speed to fit in a 45-minute window. That would not have been the entirety of my billable hours for this phase of the project. It might have been maybe 18 or 20 hours. But you can tell already, like, we are now nearly halfway through this section, so this is about 7 or 8 hours in to a project. Okay, and we've nearly got a complete trike rough concept in CAD that we could start creating some images or drawings from. I'm in no way am I saying that this is a good looking product. That's not what we're talking about here. We're just looking at basic forms and sizes and proportions. Okay, getting ready to do detailing and styling later in the project. So you can see now we're moving on to the seat. The rear seat, I've been given some inspiration for pardon me, some of the detailing. I've just done all those features and then just moved them into 3 folders, once again to contain them in that feature tree, keep everything organized. And at the bottom of the feature tree now, you'll start to notice a couple of move copy body features. And what I'm doing here is simulating having these parts in an assembly rather than where I don't, because I'm just in a part file. But I don't really want to go through the hassle right now of splitting everything out and putting it in an assembly. So using the move copy body feature lets me rotate something around, make a copy of it, see how it interacts, if it interferes with other features, and then make changes without having to do any extra work in an assembly. Even sometimes when you are working on a concept for a product, the scope is not about detailing. Sometimes you still need to get to, though, a point where you can add some fillets and small chamfers to features, to parts, to bodies, so that you can convey the design intent and the kind of, I guess, the design language that you're coming across for the product. Now, these are kids' trikes, so they're very simple in geometry. Okay, and in this product's case, we weren't doing any complex surfacing, for instance. For very simple type forms and shapes, and it's very functional. It's behind the product. The client here it's pretty hard to understand through all these sketches maybe at this point of the project, but they're very good with how these products actually collapse on themselves and function for the parent. Okay, with a lot of lessons from his time doing stroller design. For any parents out there, you would know what baby strollers are like and how they can fold and compress and how complicated some of them can be. He was bringing that to this trike design. So there's a little bit of surfacing on this part, being kind of the main hub of the project, of the product. To get an appearance around the edges that I wanted, I needed to do some split surfaces, some delete faces, and then a loft around the edges. I think we actually scrap that detail later and redo it, but it's just part of the process. As you are experimenting with forms, okay, this kind of thing is a regular occurrence. Now, this is the aspect I was talking about earlier, beefing up that leg. So yes, it was at the front. So it's split down the middle. And then I used a move copy body to rotate the side out slightly, which means, yes, there's a gap in the middle section. I've joined that up, and then it was redoing the surfacing at the top sort of hub. Now when you start to do some funny things with move copy bodies and split lines and draft angles, you'll start to get some bad surfaces, some bad faces. And you can see that's what I'm dealing with here. In a lot of these edges, because I'm dealing with sort of multiple angles, things just aren't wanting to close up neatly. All right, and again, being one of the very kind of obvious features, these big bulky legs that connect into the body of the trike. It's very important that even at concept stage, at least it's got a smooth surface, you know, like a nice rounded finished surface that'll look okay in a basic render. So we've been able to round that off and clean that up. And now we're moving on to some further details around, you know, the wheels and the front hub. We're about 2/3 of the way through this concept stage of the project now. The client did want to play with some tread on the tyres, but I think we scrap this later as well. So this is a good example here of changing design intent. So the client has acknowledged some mistakes with our initial ideas and then asking for some changes. Now those changes required some adjustments to the master sketch, but because the master sketch is there, set up, or another separate master sketch set up for the handles, okay, it's a much simpler modification, adding in some different sketch segments, a new feature for a new sweep, but very quickly we are able to pivot and create the new detail based on some of the existing geometry we've already had. Alright, now for the first time you can see a full fold of the trike. And that's all done in a part file with the move copy bodies. And what I'm starting to check here is the interference. So it's not a downside, I guess, of the master sketch. Like the master sketch enables me to control this, the size of these parts. So I can actually fold it and I can go back to the master sketch while it's in its folded state. Without rolling back, I can just click on the master sketch, edit dimensions, and it will lower the height of the handlebars so that they're no longer interfering with the rear seat. I will get to that at some stage, but I think previous to that, I've just been working through some of those earlier details to get some of those clashes out. Generally it's in this time lapse, because it's so fast, some of those changes might have just been skipped over, because to reduce the height of the handlebars, like the front handlebars, I click on the master sketch, I click a dimension, I change the number and press enter, and it's done. And that's the power of parametric modeling and setting things up in such a way where you can control the bulk of the geometry with a master sketch. Master sketch doesn't need to just be driving sketches and features. You can also drive other reference geometry that you can build off. In this example here, when I'm building the canopy, I'm using the master sketch to set the angles of what would be some of those wire extrusions. Okay, some of that frame for the canopy. And then with those sketches, I'm creating planes, and on those planes, I can create a new sketch would actually be the path that a sweep would follow to create the webbing, or the frame of the canopy that the webbing's going to connect to. And so all that can be traced back to the master sketch. I can go to the master sketch and change one of those angles, and it's going to stretch out the entire canopy. So again, we're nearing another stage of checks with the master file. What I've actually created now is a configuration in the file. And that configuration is just to flick on the folded option. Typically what I'm doing when I'm flicking over to that folded configuration is I'm unsuppressing all of those move copy bodies that I've used to rotate parts and make them together in alignment to be folded. We will see that again before the video is out. Having it in a configuration means I don't need to select individually like 6, 7, 8 different move copy body features and unsuppress or suppress them at a time. I can do that in the configuration, and I just need to click once and it will do it all. Now you can see what I've just done here. Having progressed through the development of the concept, nearing the end point, the client settling on the appearance of that rear leg that they like, we're able to go back and completely remodel it based on some new sketches put into the master sketch. Remodeling it simplified it to just a few features. And then as I rolled back down, I just deleted all the obsolete features, all the obsolete surfaces that I used previously to kind of hack that geometry. So there's a constant process of refinement, okay, making changes, moving up and down the feature tree, improving your modeling, so improving how something is created, making it more robust, meaning that as you make other changes to your master sketch, the features and geometry that you have made robustly, they don't fall in a heap when you make other adjustments to your model. And then rolling back down and clearing out obsolete features and cleaning up any dangling dimensions. Now we're getting to the last section here. We're starting to add some mock detail to the product. So what do I mean by mock detail? I mean that we're doing a very basic level of styling where we're rounding some corners or adding some texture. Might be adding holes, some hardware, but just simple and quick features that provide a bit more depth and realism to the product. So I think the client's aim was to provide a couple of basic renders in a presentation. So we're adding fillets to things like the canopy and all the plastic parts so that when they're rendered, and the render process, I'll show you a couple of images in KeyShot. When things are rendered, even though the geometry is basic, without the detail needed for production, there's enough detail there to make it look like it could be produced if you were to spend more time on the concept. Now, I like that level of detail because it's very sort of top, it's very high level, simple, and you're just trying to communicate a basic message. I do like detail, don't get me wrong, but this aspect or this element of the project where you have certain constraints, geometries, dimensions that you need to work to, but you're trying to create something new, okay, right in front of you on a screen that may get produced in real life later. This is where some of the most fun is had. Now, in this project, the trike will be collapsible with a mechanism. That mechanism at this stage is still a work in progress. It's just a concept. But we need to show enough to say, when you do this, this is what will happen to the trike. And it's going to work in a manner similar to this. Okay, so yeah, there was a couple of parts there on the bottom and some hinge points that suggest how that might work. Now, what you can see is me applying materials, getting ready to export this to KeyShot for some renders. And basically I've highlighted the different fields, highlighted the different materials that are going to be linked together. So everything that's the same color is going to be the same material. And I'm testing the folded options again and making some adjustments to some of those dimensions to make sure everything's fitting. Something happened to my system properties and my dimension sizes for a little bit there. I think they're okay now. There, yeah, they've been fixed. All right, so last minute, a couple of last minute detail changes to add a couple more details that's going in the renders. So a couple of split faces. Split faces enable you to apply different material to those faces. And then in a render, they can look completely different. So here we are, just in KeyShot. Just gonna hit play on this animation. It's not rendered, but just give you a quick idea of, where we ended up from this concept. So yeah, we have the base geometry done, some of the folding mechanism done, a couple of materials applied just to give a sense of where some of the features might lie with the branding for the company. And overall, I think it was well received. The project did progress from this point here to here. This is the finished prototype model. Some details removed from what you saw in the earlier master file or master part, but a lot of detail added. And this part of the project was where a lot of the mechanism was refined so that the whole thing could collapse. And a lot of the buttons and things that clicked in and rotated, etc. Those details were worked out. I'll just give you a brief, quick look at some of that stuff. So you can see now we're in an assembly file. Everything has been broken up from the original master file, which is here, into sub-assemblies, where we have a main frame, folding rods, a front stem, rear legs, upper handles, and a seat. And we have configurations. We have an open, we have a collapsed configuration, we have a flexible configuration. So, yeah, there you have it. So, thanks for tuning in. If you watched to the end, let me know what you thought. I'd love to hear how my approach matches up with yours. If what I do is something you'd seen before, had tried out, or it's something you'd like to try out. And you know, if you would like some help with your modeling process, feel free to get in touch. I'm looking for other product designers to help them with their modeling. I find that teaching has always improved my own skills, and I'm still keen to get better myself. So thanks very much. See you in the next one.